Let's head to the voicemail of Truth and Reason.
I was just thinking that this media narrative around Shedeur Sanders and why he's a reach at 2 for the Browns, but he's not a reach at 3 for the Giants. When the Browns and the Giants both need a quarterback equally. Both coaches and GMs are on the hot seat, but it seems like the media is trying to push Shedeur Sanders to New York when Cleveland needs him just as bad. I feel that the media just doesn't want the Browns to be relevant. They don't want to have to cover the Browns. And that may be them still being all upset about the Deshaun Watson trade. I don't know, but I think it's pretty ridiculous because the Browns need a quarterback just as bad as the Giants. Those are my thoughts, so hopefully we have a good draft and go Browns.
As always, appreciate all of the voicemails. Jeff, it is kind of interesting, but I think a lot of it is there's a wide variance of what people think of Shedeur Sanders and his ability to play in the NFL. People think he has a high floor and a pretty low ceiling.
I think the thing, and this is where it differs from last year where you had 6 quarterbacks go so high in round 1. If you're a team like Cleveland, obviously you were monitoring Cam Ward and Shedeur Sanders the entire time. Eventually, you came out of the combine, and this seemed to be a consensus for a lot of teams. It became that Cam Ward was the best quarterback in this class. There was no longer a discussion of who was. And so if you're a team like Cleveland and you just spent all this time and you established that Cam Ward is the better quarterback. Now, last year you had teams like Atlanta. You had teams like Denver who said, we're not in the Caleb talks. We're not in the Jaden Daniel talks. So we're going to look at guys that may be more in our range. When it's just 2 quarterbacks, you firmly established that you thought that Cam Ward was the better player. Now, if you say, well, here, let's say in Shedeur, you got 6 guys in that room who raise their hand and say, didn't we just say he's not as good as the other guy? So how do you just all of a sudden then say, well, we'll take him at 2 when you basically just spent weeks convincing yourself that he is not as good as the guy that's going to go 1 pick before him? It makes for a different scenario. As far as it's not okay for the Browns, but it's okay for the Giants. Every front office is different. And look at it right now. Shedeur Sanders today, if he walks into the New York Giants locker room, it is Jameis Winston, it is Russell Wilson. The expectations are extremely low. We know what the expectations would be for Shedeur Sanders if he goes number 2. It's been tough, and I kind of compared the Shedeur Sanders situation a little bit to Bronny James, and we're going to go through this in probably the next year, most likely 2, with Arch Manning. When you have these legacy kids whose parents are so still involved in the game, part of the game, there's a respect factor that national media is trying to keep here. You don't want to, get yourself into a bad spot with a guy who is so important to the game. So maybe they're not getting, evaluated and spoken about as wide open as maybe a Jackson Dart would. So, it's weird to know where the truth really lies with Shedeur Sanders. But I am of the firm believer that I think when we talk about Shedeur Sanders, we say maybe Shedeur Sanders is a little bit better, has played a little bit more than Jalen Milroe and Jackson Dart, as opposed to saying Cam Ward or Shedeur Sanders, either one, you're good.